are recorded and will be available to the public on our YouTube channel after the meeting has taken place. Your participation indicates your consent to being included in the meeting or recording. So, first of all, Karen, can we do apologies and a roll call, please?
Yes, bear with me, it's just loading. Come out of the other meeting. Okay, starting from the top. So, Councillor Simonis.
Yep.
Councillor Chapman.
Yes.
Councillor Pitt.
Hello.
Councillor Gregson.
Yeah.
Councillor Christine Green.
Yes.
Councillor Maslin.
I am here. Good evening, all.
Good evening. Councillor Derek Giles. Can't see him there. Okay, so that's absent. And Councillor Cooper Marsh. No, Justin. Okay, that's absent. Councillor Speed.
Here.
Councillor Thorpe, we have apologies from. And Councillor Ferguson.
Present.
That's the roll call complete, Chair.
Cool, thank you for that. Okay, so declarations of interest. So to receive from councillors declarations as to disclosable pecuniary interest and or non-statutory disclosable interest along with the nature of those interests in relation to any agenda item. Has any councillor got anything to declare?
No.
Chair, can I suggest there's so much to cover in this, so we'll just have to declare it as it goes because it's hard to keep track of the myriad projects that fall under this committee.
Yeah, happy to do that. Delphine.
Yeah, sorry, I'm here as a member of the public, so I wanted to address the committee if that's okay with you.
Oh, sorry, I've skipped over public participation. Of course, yes, go for it.
Sorry about that. I think it's just some information that obviously I sent you, Rob and Stephen and Karen, some information which I think the strategy committee may want to be aware of. I had a conversation with Sarah Comboy today, and she made me inform that the Peterborough and Cambridge overall combined authority are looking at all age autism strategy, which would include some workplace training and things like that. It's not official yet, but they're hoping that in May there may be a consultation or thing like that. But obviously I've been given the name of a lady, which is the commissioner, and I will be liaising with her as my work as the DAD working group. But obviously we have been looking at training for member of staffs when it comes to autism and becoming more inclusive with the town. So I thought you should be aware. And also I'm going to push so that St. Neots is going to be the place where they're going to try things first and things like that. So hopefully I will keep you up to date with all of that. The other thing is I wanted to bring to your attention something that I think, again, with accessibility, a lot of the residents have been complaining that there's not access to some of the shops. I know that we are going to look at the neighborhood plan and how we can make the town more inclusive and accessible. It is possible to get some folding ramp, and I think working with some of shop owners, either partly funding or working also with the town center initiative, to get shops who have steps to acquire folding ramps so that our residents and tourists might be able to access some of the vicinity we've got in town. Obviously, since we're looking at the neighborhood plans, it's something which should be quite easy to do, but may address a big problem that a lot of people in wheelchair and scooter have to access. And the third thing, it's a project which has been discussed before, and that's pending on having the land. And talking to Philip, he kind of reminding me that before. I know there is a need for a pet crematorium, if I remember properly. And it's something that, as a neighborhood plan, pending if we have a land, it's maybe a project that the town council may want to look into. I know, Colin, you're laughing, but it has been mentioned before because there is a need. And obviously, Huntington is going to have a brand new, lovely crematorium for humans. Okay, but there has been a point made before that there is a need for a pet crematorium. And also it's maybe something that as a town council, as a strategy or a neighborhood plan, you may want to look at and investigate in the future. So those are my 3 things.
Thank you. So I think there's a couple of points on here, Delphine. So taking them kind of back to front almost, the point around the neighbourhood plan. So item 5 on the agenda will be to set up the neighbourhood plan working group, which will look at what do we mean by reviewing the neighbourhood plan, what's the objectives of that, and that will be the place to feed in new input. So I think probably I'd recommend that we defer that point to once that group has been set up, and if you wanted to be co-opted onto that group because I don't believe it necessarily has to be members from strategy that are on there, then that might be a way forward with that, because I know that's been something you've been championing for a period of time.
I'm happy to do that, yes.
Similarly, so the other 2 points, I have seen your email from today, and I'm sorry, I know you've tried to call me.
No, that's okay.
But it sounds like there's stuff that's starting to happen and will mature over the next couple of months. Potentially, maybe we give some agenda time in 2 months' time at the next strategy meeting, where you can play where we are with those points, specifically what support, what changes we might want to make to the strategy, and it becomes something a bit more action orientated.
Yeah.
Would that work for you?
Yeah, that's no problem. And regarding the ramp, they can be quite inexpensive. Obviously, we want quality, and it's something that we may want to work with over. So I can feed that through the DAD working group. But I wanted you guys to be aware of this so that you can feed it in your strategy and how you want to move things forward regarding training of staff and autism and things like that.
Lovely, thank you. I mean,
thank you.
Subject to how the committee feel more widely about this, I'm happy to flip the agenda a little bit and pick up that neighbourhood plan item first, and set up that working group and propose it forward, and that would give Delphine an opportunity to be involved in that work. If that's something that we can do, I assume it is, and then we can let Delphine go.
Yeah.
Karen. Sorry, I can see hands appearing, but I can't click on who they are. Barry, your hand's up. I'll start there.
Thanks, Chair. I think that we need to agree a timetable for the neighbourhood plan and the extent of which, whether we're doing a review or we're completely rewriting the neighbourhood plan. I think a lot of things that have come up are not really neighbourhood plan items, because the neighbourhood plan's about the specific big items and the strategy of incorporating the strategy of the council. So,
yes. Can before we go down this road, can I just confirm that we've got agreement to move this item up the agenda? I'm happy to do that, unless Karen and Philip tell me there's a reason why we can't.
Yeah.
Fine.
Yeah.
In that case, then, sorry, Barry, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I'd be a little bit concerned if the review of the neighbourhood plan became a complete sort of redrafting of the neighbourhood plan, knowing because I think I'm the only person that was involved in the original neighbourhood plan, and it took about 3 years to put together, and we need to actually say when we're going to have this review completed, rather than have it as an open-ended project. And within that timescale, we need to decide what can be reviewed, rather than put try to incorporate every idea and within the neighbourhood plan. Planning policies are particularly important within the neighbourhood plan, because we mustn't forget it is ostensibly a planning document, and a review of the neighbourhood plan is intended for us to influence planning of our neighbourhood. Other things that are outside of that we can do, but they don't necessarily need to be incorporated into the neighbourhood plan.
Indeed. Ben?
Yeah, I mean, Barry's pretty much said it, but I think, yeah, just to be really clear, the neighbourhood plans are statutory planning documents. So those are documents that HDC are obliged to certainly consider and, if not follow, when considering planning applications. Anything that is not a planning consideration belongs in our strategy document, not in our neighbourhood plan. There will obviously be some overlap, but I think we do need to, I think, so the other thing I was going to say was that I think Delphine is doing a bit of a one-woman show keeping this DAD project up and running, and all credit to her. I think it's incredibly important, and I'm really grateful that she keeps banging the drum for it. But I think we do need to try and build this into the fabric of the way our council works. But I think we just need to be really careful about what effort to put where.
Okay. May I be permitted to answer to some of the queries? Yeah, the only point I was going to say is to make sure that, yes, it is a planning thing like that, but it's also, setting it in clear so that for autism becoming more autism and inclusive or things like that, and, putting our strategy there, it also means that then AHDC, may have to support some of the things we do. But in that, we will, as I mentioned before, we got changing rooms and things like that. So it may not seem a big deal, and it may be something kind of broad-based, kind of more broad than just small details. But certainly we need to look at, either in a strategy document or neighborhood plan, how it's also a wish list of things that we need to do and how we're going to accomplish, and force in some degree sometimes AHDC to give us support. And some of the projects like changing rooms or things like that, might need to be included, and in the broader aspect of becoming more autism friendly. And that was in that, but it doesn't matter if it's strategy or if it's neighborhood plan, but we need to have a clear vision. And as Barry said, a good time on to when things need to be delivered.
So following from that point then, so the resolution I'm going to propose is that we go ahead and we set up a neighbourhood plan working group. Per the agenda, that includes 4 committee members, deputy town clerk and town development manager. And that the initial remit of that group is to report back to the strategy committee at the next meeting, which will be in June, with terms of reference, the objectives that we're seeking to achieve, and the timeline that will be, the wider timeline that will be achieved in. And once that's been established, so that's end of resolution, end of proposal, but once that's been established, then Delphine, anything which you're proposing or others are proposing that actually don't fit into the neighbourhood plan then come into the strategy as just general points. So that's my proposal. Sorry, a little bit lengthy there. Do I have a seconder on that?
Yeah, could you do a proposal again, because that never fit on the agenda, on the minute.
No
I didn't quite catch exactly what's been proposed.
Okay, so I think the proposal is as it is written on the agenda.
Oh, okay.
So members resolve to set up neighbourhood plan working party to include 4 committee members, deputy town clerk and town development manager.
Yeah,
I'll second. Oh,
Okay, I'll take Christine. Thank you. Okay, Councillor Chapman.
Chair, the process for the neighbourhood plan, as it will have to go out to external examination, and it requires involvement of councillors and wide consultation. I'm not comfortable about a report back in June, in 3 months, 3 months' time. This is something which, when we were preparing the neighbourhood plan, we were having weekly meetings and putting it, doing the work very hard, and it still took 3 years. I'm
not suggesting we will have a final
3 months.
In that time, what I'm suggesting, and this is not part of the resolution, so it's kind of separate, but that actually that working group comes back to strategy with broadly what it's thinking might be achievable. Are we heading for May 22, or are we looking for a longer term piece of work at that kind of level of information? so that we put some structure around this, because at the moment we've talked a number of times about reviewing the neighbourhood plan, but nobody's been consistent. We haven't agreed on what that means.
Chair, if I may, I fully agree that needs to be done, but I'm not comfortable with it being June, when I don't see why that piece of work shouldn't be completed within a few weeks and reported back.
June would be the next meeting. That's the only reason I picked that date. The next strategy meeting.
Can I propose an amendment then that we aim for an extraordinary meeting of the strategy committee specifically to deal with this item in 4 weeks' time?
Yeah, I'm happy to accept that. So, sorry, was that Karen?
It was, yes. Just obviously, just for members to be aware that from the 6th of May, virtual meetings will no longer be allowed, and that's the reason that you all resolved at full council to have the ATCM on the 4th of May, because we may not be able to hold face-to-face meetings or virtual meetings, so you need to be aware of that.
Can we do it before the virtual meetings end then?
So we're trying.
Which
is just you'll have to look at some extra evenings to put that in, because we've got the ATCM as an extra evening and the annual parish meeting as an extra evening as well. So there's 2 extra meetings already. The working group can meet as many times as they want. So they can crack on with the work.
I think. Yeah.
Can I just check? Do you have a full council meeting? Oh, 27th.
Yeah,
3 weeks.
Could they report to that one? Would you be happy with that?
Chair.
Sorry, so hang on, so I'm losing the point of where we are. So Barry, you propose an amendment. Do you have, just to deal with that in its isolation, do you have a seconder for that amendment? Yeah, you're on mute.
Chair, you said you accepted the amendment, so I didn't propose the amendment. You've accepted it as an amendment to the original motion. So it's down to your seconder.
Okay, so Christine?
Hang on. Yes, yeah, that's fine. I'll second that.
Okay, so we have a substantive motion then. So let me work through the hands. So Barry, your hand's still up. I assume you've spoken. So Ben?
So the point about reporting back, if we want to get on with figuring out what's possible, I suggest that we ask that committee to report back at the full council meeting in 3 weeks, so 27th of April, with a proposal for a timeline, because I think it's quite useful for the full council to know, but it's not proposing a great big debate about it, but effectively getting back to full council to say this is the timeline of the work we want to do.
Okay.
So if you accept that amendment, then
so Councillor Chapman's amendment was within 4 weeks, which would encompass your addition there as well, Ben.
There we go.
Okay, so Delphine, I'm gonna move on if that's okay.
Yeah, no, I'm just going to leave you guys to keep working. Just as a point of information, when the first neighbourhood plan was voted on, I believe AHDC had some feedback, and there was some feedback somewhere. So it might be interesting if we can track those feedback to see what it were, and may help us as in the review of the neighbourhood plan. So that was just as a point of information.
Okay, thank you. So we have a motion on the table. Karen, I can't see if you've popped that in the chat.
I have, at people's
hands and whatnot. Okay, so let me just read that out. So, so members to resolve set the neighbourhood plan working party to include fourth as written in the agenda, with the amendment of that we aim for an extraordinary meeting before the strategy committee before the 5th. Extraordinary meeting of the strategy committee before the 5th of May. Councillor Chapman, is that what your amendment was? I thought the amendment was that there would be a playback within 4 weeks, not necessarily, but what we're saying, not necessarily to the strategy committee. Can we just be clear on that point?
It was originally strategy.
I did say 4 weeks, Chair, and as Karen is saying, Sorry to cut across you, Karen. But as Karen was saying, I did say report back to the strategy committee, but I hadn't considered the date of the town council meeting, and I think that we need to be as slick and quick about this as possible. So as long as that would enable the report to be made at the town council meeting.
Okay, so is that still the amendment that you would like to go with, or would you like to amend that amendment to say no? Let's just go with that.
I think as long as we can get it to the full council, I think we all know what we're aiming at.
Okay. Excellent. So if there's no further comments on that, let's put that to a vote, please.
No, there is.
So, oh, sorry, Colin.
Thank you. Karen said that we can't have virtual meetings after May the 4th. Reading this month's first, the leaflet that HDC councillors get from some organisation or the other, they're saying that we can't have it, virtual meetings finish on the 4th, but we'll start again on the 14th. I don't know about you lot, I would not be happy to go to a physical meeting of the council, but that's by the by. Yeah. Second point, if we are going to rework the neighbourhood plan, do we have to do, or does it have to go back to a referendum?
I think that's a point that that working group needs to get to the bottom of, because we've had some conversations.
In which case, surely we need to get all of our ducks correctly in a row and not try and rush this in 4 weeks' time.
So the update in 4 weeks' time would be, these are the types of things that we need to go to a referendum. These are the types of things that might not. So it'd be a playback of the terms of this neighbourhood plan and the structures around that, rather than any specifics. Because you're right, to Barry's point,
okay,
that's
thank you.
Excellent. So all in favour of the amendment as written, please.
Sorry, Rob. I think I've just reworded the things, I think, to capture what we've discussed, because I think we still talked about an extraordinary meeting of strategy. I've just posted in the chat what I think we've discussed. Sorry, Karen, to confuse things, but I don't know if that's.
I just type it as the person reads out.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
So
you absolutely did.
That's okay.
It's just we've had lots of overlapping conversations, and
I know. So long as Councillor Chapman and Rob are okay with the new wording, and they're seconders, I don't see there's a problem. Thank you.
Yeah, Christine.
Is she reading?
Yes.
She's reading.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Christine.
I was reading, yeah. Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, so we'll ignore the hands up that went a moment ago. So just put Ben's rewritten proposal to the vote. All in favour, please. Oh, yeah. Caroline?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Any against? Or any abstaining? Lovely. So that motion is carried. Thank you. Okay, so before we go back to the order of the agenda, Caroline, was there a point you wanted to mention on that? I know we've gone through the vote and that's been accepted, but is there anything you wanted to add after the event?
Sorry, I was going to suggest that it was the town clerk rather than the deputy town clerk. I know we don't have a town clerk at the moment, but I was of the view that if this is a working party that is going on for a reasonable length of time, which I expect it will be, that it should really be the town clerk, and we can have the deputy town clerk step in for the town clerk in the interim until we get either a locum clerk or the town clerk comes back. Sorry, that was my suggestion, but I missed the
Okay, yeah. Philip, would you like to come back on that point?
On that particular point, at the moment, I think you need the deputy clerk as your point of contact to move this one forward. The reason I put my hand up was you said in your agenda you're going to resolve to set up a neighbourhood plan working party to include 4 committee members. Do you wish to get those committee members tonight, because you've limited yourself to 3 weeks to come back with a report?
Yeah, I think that would be the intention. I would. The only thing I'm mindful of is we have, I think, 2 members of the committee who aren't present this evening and may wish to be. Okay, well, first question, do we have a volunteer to chair this working group? Barry, you
I'd
put
be
your hand up.
happy
Is that
to-
volunteering?
Yeah, I'd be happy to chair it because I'm the person that has the neighbourhood plan preparation experience.
Okay, thank you for that. So now that we have a chair of that working group, if we can elect 3 other committee members from the people present, then that's great. If not, then we will pick up with Derek and Justin offline and aim to have perhaps some names circulated by the end of the week or something along those lines. So do we have 3 other volunteers?
Chair, if I may, sorry.
Oh, sorry, Karen. Yeah.
Could I suggest if I send an email to all the committee members this evening to get the 3 volunteers, and then that way everybody's included? Would you like me to do that?
Barry, are you happy with that as it's your working group?
Yes, I'd be happy with that.
Yep, and then that includes everybody then.
Chair.
Got it. Yeah.
I think but with 3 weeks is a tight turnaround to achieve very much at all. But basically, what we need is some professional advice, and I think that I don't know if that will cost anything if Philip or Karen's able to advise. I know normally you have consultants, I'm sure, have remunerated quite generously for this sort of process, but just in terms of outlining the timeline, what we need to know is, what is the scope, what is the potential scope of this, and the timeline needs to be, we need to get professional advice. So I just wanted to know how that's going to work in practice in the next 3 weeks, hopefully.
For me, my first point of contact would be HTC initially.
My thoughts on it,
Philip?
My thoughts are that working party needs to actually just sit and look at your existing neighbourhood plan and scope how much of the plan needs revising, updating. If there's very little, you won't need professional guidance, and it may not need to go to referendum if they're not making major changes. If you're just, if you're just tweaking little bits here and there, you should be fine. But if you're going to do major an overhaul, May 22 may not be realistic, and you will need professional advice, and you'll need to set a budget.
If I can come back on that, please, Rob.
Yeah, of course.
So for me, in terms of what I think we should be looking at with this review of the neighbourhood plan, so there's nothing really on the environment and carbon reduction in there. I think that's an opportunity that we've got that we should take, but I think that's quite complicated. So there's lots of things you can't put in your neighbourhood plan, and I think there are lots of things you can put in your neighbourhood plan, but I'm not the judge to, I think that we all need professional support if that's something that avenue we want to go down. Much of the content in there seems good to me, but it's the things that are missing that I'm interested in, grappling with, and I think that's going to be a bit of a job.
Barry, it sounds like you have your first volunteer.
I'm surprised, Chairman, that we haven't got Stephen with his hand up here.
I'm not volunteering for anything else at the moment.
Yes, and yourself, Chairman.
I have not volunteered. I'm in the same sort of space as Stephen, though. I think I need to look at certain work commitments and how much, given how much time you've been very clear that this will take, Barry. I think we all need to be mindful of what we're signing up to and actually the commitment that comes with that. But as Karen has suggested, let's circulate this by email.
Especially in the middle of an election campaign, I was going to say.
Okay.
Get the working group set up and get the first meeting in the next week, and then we can start the ball rolling. And as Barry said, there's a neighbourhood plan officer at HTC we can talk to.
Okay, so we have a plan for the neighbourhood plan. We have the working party carrying the actions with you to set the to send the email asking for volunteers. And I would hope we would have those in place by the end of the week, and we'll at least know where we stand in relation to the 27th. So excellent. So if we can return back up the agenda, I'm also mindful we move that forward for Delphine's benefit, but there you go. So item number 3, which is the minutes. So to approve the minutes of the Strategy and Development Committee meeting held on the 1st of December 2020. So I'm happy to propose these straight off. You've all had opportunities to. Thanks, Barry. All in favour?
Chair, sorry, can I just make a comment?
Sorry. Yeah,
would it be
Ben?
possible to attach to the minutes the strategy document that we approved? So rather than just having a note that we've approved the document, actually to include that as part of the minutes themselves.
I believe it was attached to the full town council minutes because we recommended to full town council, the council then approved that version, and I think, Karen, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it was attached to that.
It was, Chair, yeah.
Okay, I've lost track. I'm sure that's true. I think often they get attached to the agendas, but not always to the minutes. But maybe that's because it doesn't matter. I'll shut up. Thank you. I'm not sure.
Okay, but okay, Karen, if we could maybe take that point away and confirm that, and if it hasn't happened, then we amend it to these minutes after the event.
Thank you. But that sounds like it's sorted, so thank you.
Yeah,
Cool,
the strategic plan, once approved, it is live on the website as well, so it's publicly available.
Excellent. So all in favour?
Yep.
Aye.
Yep. Yes.
Anyone against? Or abstaining? Okay, that's carried. Thank you very much. Lovely. And then agenda item number 4. So having a bit of a look at the detail of the strategic plan itself. So I've had a couple of conversations with Karen in the intervening period. We've been looking at a number of the points on these and progressing them. So what I'm going to run through now is a view on, there are a couple of items that we can probably close off as complete. There are a number where I think we can request some updates from various people. And there are potentially a couple that we might want to remove or committee members may wish to add. So in terms of structure to this, I was just going to run through closures, then updates, and then sort of other items that we might want to discuss that people want to draw out. However, I'm mindful of the time on this, so we'll give it as much time as we possibly can. So the first 2 items that I was going to draw attention to are the one, actually interesting that Colin just mentioned it, so around meetings be able to be held online. My suggestion is that we knock this one on the head now, in the sense that it's out of our control, and I believe that as a full council we are supportive and don't need to do anything else around. We generally want to have that option available to us as long as the government will allow it, in which case it comes out of the strategy and it becomes a government decision rather than ours. So I'm not going to propose resolutions against all of these, but is there kind of any view or feeling on this as a suggestion? Ben, you're on mute.
Thanks for noticing. Sorry, yeah, where are we getting? Where are you reading this from? I'm a bit lost.
Oh, so from the strategy itself.
Is that as per the agenda pack or the big document?
It's the big document.
Okay, right. I think for me on this point, there's an issue around whether we're going to try and do blended or hybrid meetings, which I think is a bit more of a challenge than either yes or no to online. I think hybrid would be great, but might still need a bit of attention.
So the wording, yeah, so when we worded this originally, we did talk about meetings will continue to be available online, even in the event that NALC advice changes. So that's our intention. And then I think within that, we've still got the boundaries to say, well, you know, is that blended? Is that pure online? Is it just a YouTube presentation afterwards and we've all sat in a room? You know, what does that look like?
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, it was just a general point. I haven't got anything very intelligent to say, so I'll be shut up again.
Thank you. Stephen, you're going to say something? Oh, Caroline, you've got your hand up. Sorry, Stephen, hold. Caroline.
I was just going to say that if we can't hold hybrid or online meetings, then I think we should reduce the 80% number, because I think that was put in there assuming that we would be able to have online meetings. Obviously, our attendance has been significantly up while we've had online meetings. And I know that personally, I won't be prepared to go to a meeting until I have a jab or 2 jabs. And also, working practices have changed as well. So my husband now works in London late in the evening, so I'm not going to be able to make quite a lot of face-to-face meetings, whereas I would be able to make all of them just as I have done online. So, but my proposal there would be to reduce that 80% figure, because I think that's quite high for face-to-face meetings. I'm not sure if that's across committees, is it as well, Rob, or is it just full town council meetings?
Again, it was a broad brush statement, so it could be interpreted as we choose. It was just SNTC meetings. So there you go. Sorry, Stephen, do you want to make a point?
Yeah, so my issue is that during the first year of the council, I did miss a few meetings because I travel for work, and if I'm physically not in the country, I wasn't able to attend meetings. And so having some semblance of an online capability to attend meetings online would be incredibly useful, I think, because of modern working practices. And like Caroline said, attendances from both councillors and the public have massively increased during the online era. So I'm keen for it to continue. I do understand that in my working experience, running hybrid meetings is incredibly difficult to do, because it's just the difference between people talking across each other in the hall and then trying to involve the people who are online. So that is a big challenge. I'm completely in favour of online meetings continue. I know that there's maybe one councillor who hasn't been able to make so many meetings, but in general, most of us have attended far more meetings than we would otherwise. So I'm completely in favour of doing that. I think 80% is a good target, whatever, to be honest. But I defer to the rest of the committee.
So the question here is there another action that we want to take against this strategy point, or is it something where we say we've done what we need to do, and unless something materially changes, like we're not allowed to have online meetings anymore, actually is this point done, and we can focus our attention on other things, or do we want to take
we can't until we find out what's happening. We can't really do much, can we? It's completely unknown at the
moment. Barry, you've got your hand up.
Yes, question really for Philip, and that's the document about online meetings. Presumably working parties can still be held online and aren't covered because they're not voting, having binding votes on the council. And secondly, if people were only able to dial in, they would be able to take part in the meeting perhaps, and not be able to vote. Is that sensible?
Correct on both counts, Barry.
Thank you.
Okay. So in light of that, given that we're still working with unknowns, I'm going to suggest that we close this one. But obviously it will remain there, and it's one that we revisit if we need to, because our strategic objective is no longer possible once the advice has been confirmed and has all been worked through. All right. The other one that I think we can close off fairly quickly, hopefully, is about tracking the strategy. And my point there is that we are tracking it by virtue of the fact that we hold these meetings, and we're having a look at this periodically. So it's not being swept under the carpet, and it is something that's happening. So as I say, my suggestion is that we close that one out as well.
And we're looking at the goals. No, I'm not sure which exact block of text we're referring to.
Okay, let me just call it up. I mean, I can share my screen actually if that would be helpful.
Yeah, it might be actually.
So I am in the strategy. So this is column C and row 24.
I've only got a PDF, so I can't see the numbers and all that business.
Right, okay. I will share in. Oh, let me just share my screen.
Oh, you're signed as a guest, though. That's never going to work.
I shouldn't be a guest. I've literally just come off the.
Yeah. Oh, there we go.
Yeah, got it.
Yeah.
It's probably a bit dinky. Let me.
That's great.
There you go. You'll notice this is in Google. I will put it back into Excel after tonight. So this is the point. I'm just going to turn the freezing off. Right, there we go. So that's the suggestion. So I'm going to mark that one.
Mm-hmm.
So Right, there were two which, and actually, Caroline, this plays to your point around the 80% target. So these were two where I did question whether these attendance targets were relevant. And this wasn't off the back of necessarily the point around moving from online to not online, although that's certainly relevant. It was more about the point of, is there anything that we can do beyond that? So we published the information in the March full council meeting, which is great. But what are we going to do with this afterwards? Or actually, are these what do these targets mean? Or actually, are we wasting energy on trying to track them? So it's just a discussion point around that.
So, Chair, I think it looks like you're really on top of this, which is great. I just think we need to check it like a couple of times a year. And if the chair of strategy is happy just to monitor it, we don't need to discuss it until it, we fall off target again.
Makes sense. Caroline, do you have a view as chair of personnel? I know this isn't a staffing issue, but it's sort of in the same sort of camp.
Yeah, my view is that if we do fall below, then we should be doing something about it. So maybe scheduling meetings at a more convenient time for people, etc. And that should be what's happening if we are falling below those targets. It's the sort of like, why are we falling below those targets? I think that would be the problem is we don't actually know why people don't attend. So all we're told is that acceptable apologies have been sent or whatever. And so, yeah, so that would just be my view on it, that if we do start falling below them, we say, why are we falling below them? And it may well be that, if we move back to in-person meetings, it's going to fall significantly below that, but.
Okay, so I've made that comment in there. I'll update this properly and then recirculate. Thank you. So if there's nothing further on there, so I will take these off as removes. We'll leave them in there with that amendment to kind of just track them on a 6 monthly basis and see where it goes. Karen.
Sorry, I was on mute. Yes, it was just a point about the attendance registers. Of course, they're not just for us to see how well councillors are attending meetings. They are also there for the public who vote the councillors in to see how councillors are performing over the year. So when they come to elections, they've got a better informed choice.
Yeah, of course. Okay. Now, there's a whole bunch of these where there's the potential for updates. I'm going to rattle through them because I've tried to be specific on what the update that's required is for each one. But we can play this in a different way if this turns into something that's a little bit too tedious. My assumption is that everybody's kind of had a chance to read through these, review, and has got their own views on where we are with some of these items. So hopefully these will be fairly rapid. The first item on here, I'm just going to hide some of these columns, is around the website and updating about the work of the respective councils. Karen, when we spoke about this previously, you'd said that the work on the Visit St Neots website was coming to a completion. Ben let me know that actually that's done. There was then some suggestions on what we did with this around listing district councillors in the green boxes and a couple of other things. Is there any update around that, or actually has the work on the Visit St Neots website just taken precedent recently and nothing's materially moved forward on this? We just need to push the date out.
Yeah, you're right. We were waiting for the Visit St Neots site to be finished, so I can pick the SNTC one up with the web designer next week. This week it's holiday time, so once he's back next week, I can pick up SNTC and progress that one forward.
Cool. So
hopefully by the time we have the ATCM, would be good to get most of the changes done.
Indeed. So the next one was around the profiles for each councillor, which we have resolved at full council to do. Karen, you were going to get me the specifics of the wording that's put around that. I am also going to go and have a chat with Caroline Green because I think this suggestion came from her, and I was going to ask her if she would actually move this forward. I think once we've got the update, the resolution, though, from a strategic point of view, our job is done, and then this is back into the hands of councillors to actually make it happen. So this potentially is one that we could take off. Karen, is there anything further on that?
No, just to say the only biography that was sent through was from Councillor Gordon-Thorpe. I haven't had any others so far, so we could do with a few more.
Yeah, I think Caroline might be quite good at soliciting some of that from people.
Yeah.
That's no point. Just I think it's just useful to have a template to work to, so we don't end up with one sentence from one person and 1,000 words from another.
Yeah, certainly. St Neots Youth Council, again, this was just purely a resolution one. What was the resolution and when was it? Otherwise, I've got a previous note that that's all on track. I think the elections were going to be in May, and then that should be up and running by June. Stephen,
we are absolutely on track to elect our first youth council in May. Yes.
Excellent.
Do we have any candidates? Do we know?
We have a steering group of about 10 young people. And they've had meetings with other youth councils, and the model they're moving towards, in which is with the youth council, is open to anybody who's of the correct age, but they intend to elect a committee that will run the youth council. So I think we're gonna open up to everybody, and that the 10 young people who've been involved in as the steering committee will be appointed as the first committee, and then the youth council will elect them going forward. So it's all looking very positive, and they are fantastic young people as well. I'm really impressed by them.
Excellent. So this next one, Karen, so I'll just hand over to you on this. We've talked about this a couple of times about what the accreditation would mean for the council.
Yes, and this is one of the reasons I'm glad Philip's here. Philip, so this was briefly touched upon before, and I do know, I think you have mentioned that it is a lengthy process, possibly up to a couple of years. I mean, are you able to help me with this one about how we can move it forward? Costs involved? Would it require additional resource? Have you started it at Huntingdon?
I actually delayed starting until my previous deputy clerk returned from maternity leave, and that's one of the roles she's got. And to get accreditation, are you going to go straight in for the top level and so you miss all the bottom levels out, or are you going to do it on a step-by-step basis? And virtually it is just working through the pro forma, and it is, are your risk assessment documents up to date? Is this policy? Have you got that policy? What is the process for doing? And it is all policy, process, procedures, how you actually run the council, etc. So it can be time consuming, but if you've got lots of the things in place already, it's a tick in the box. But you do need a member of staff dedicated to steering it through, because there will be a lot of groundwork to do, a lot of typing up policies, reports, updating, or we haven't got this, how do we do it, etc. It is not a quick process, and you should be able to get it done in 12 months.
Okay, thank you. So, and with our current staffing levels, we wouldn't have somebody that we can dedicate to that process. We're a small team already, and with our day-to-day statutory duties, as well as the stuff coming out of the strategy and this as well, we would need another member of staff. No,
absolutely. And this was never going to be this was never going to be something we were going to kick off next week or next month.
No.
The next 3.
Yeah.
I put an aspirational thing in here on having a level of accreditation going into the elections next year. I think that would still be a good aim.
And bearing in mind we've got a recruitment freeze as well for a year that was resolved. So yeah.
Yeah.
FT.
Indeed. Well, so question for the committee then. What do we want to do with this? Do we kick it into the long grass for a period of time and effectively report back to full council that we've taken it out of the strategy? Or is it something that we want the more information on, so at least we can make an informed decision subject to such and such and staffing levels and whatever else budget, that we would start this work in on a particular point?
Thanks. I think just as a first port of call, we just need to be, have the full, all of our staff, working their regular hours before we can begin to look at this, or our senior staff working their regular hours, which currently we don't have. So I think that would be the trigger for us to look at this again.
Sorry, we are working our regular hours and beyond. I'm not quite sure.
I know. I'm just aware of, obviously we're in a public meeting, but not all of our staff currently working their regular hours.
That's only the Priory Centre that are on furlough. Everybody else is working.
No, I'm referring to people that are on leave at the moment.
One person that we have off. Yes.
Yeah, that's all I'm referring to.
Yes.
So your suggestion, Ben, is that we leave this until we have all staff back in play, regardless of reasons, and that we then come back to this. So maybe we set a review point in maybe 3 months on that. I mean, with luck, that particular situation should be.
Yeah.
We all hope that's resolved.
Yeah, the next strategy meeting 2 months, we can just check in. Would be fine, I think.
Yeah, 2 months. That's a good point. So the next one, Caroline, this was something that we talked about reviewing the clerk's appraisal process and objective settings. I had a brief conversation with Karen, which we'll bring in, but did you want to sort of set the scene around this and the role of the strategy committee in that process?
Yeah, so we had a bit of a chat about it, didn't we, as well, Rob? So I was just conscious that appraisals should currently be going on, and I just wanted the sort of thoughts of the strategy group on feeding the strategy in to the appraisal process. I must admit, I've thought about it, and I think just the full strategy should be fed in, and then as each of the managers will be setting their own objectives, then there just should be some sort of check that everything in the strategy is covered by the objectives of the relevant manager.
And Karen, do you want to respond to that? I mean, again, we just
yes, I think it's come up in a few previous meetings of the personnel committee and some of the working parties. So the strategies of the council are what the town clerk is set with, and it's his job to work to those, and then he filters those down through to the line managers to help him achieve those. So the strategic plan is what the town clerk takes his objectives from, which is set in his appraisal process, and then the town clerk, as line manager for the rest of the staff, would then set the appraisals and objectives based on his own, and then they would filter their objectives down through to their staffing level. So the process feeds down from the top from the town clerk, and I think Philip will back me up on that. So.
Well, he has his hand up. Philip?
I was just going to say that's exactly the same process which follows in Huntingdon. The strategy is my goals, and then I filter them down to the staff to achieve on behalf of the council. So snap.
Thank you, Philip.
So how does that become something that's measurable? I mean, it would be entirely unreasonable to say, do all of this in a year. No clerk could make this amount of stuff happen. I mean, we're being selective about it, but how do you say, well, that has been a good year, a percentage has been completed, or that has not been a good year, a percentage has not been completed? How does that play through? Caroline, I'm asking this question on your behalf. It may not be relevant, but Philip?
The way that we actually work it is our strategy is for the term of the council, 4 years. It's adopted in the June after the election. And that's what we work through in that 4-year period, because if you're doing a large project, there can be all sorts of delays on that. Some quick wins obviously are in there and can be ticked off quickly, but it's towards the end of the 4 years that you're actually wanting, year 3, you want to see progress is being made. So by the end of year 4, you know where you are, but it's not a yearly target. It's a council term target.
Caroline, do you want to? Oh, Ben, sorry, you've got your hand up, and then Caroline.
Thank you. I mean, I think that sounds eminently sensible. The situation we have now is we're coming, into year 4 of our 4-year term, and we don't want to just coast for the remaining year. So maybe there's a conversation to have either at this strategy meeting or separately. I'm not sure where the best place to have the conversation about identifying, how we pick up on that at the point we are in the term. Welcome, Philip, or anyone else's thoughts about that.
I think it's good. It's good that you're going to have that review of where you are. You don't leave it until the year 4. Each year you review it, and of course in year 4 you need to start thinking about the year after, what target should be in there for the new council to pick up as well.
Caroline, how does that sit with you?
Yeah, I was happy for it to be filtered down. I think that I just like that so all these sort of projected completion dates, projected resolution dates. I think it'd be really good to have sort of hard targets in there on the statistics and things like that. So for the things that can be done.
I would support that. So in the agenda, when we were going to talk about this point, which is part of this discussion, this is about us making a recommendation to the personnel committee. I don't know if that needs to be as formal as a resolution from the strategy committee. It kind of almost feels that it shouldn't be. But does that give you enough to take back with the views of the strategy committee to take back into personnel to tick what you need to achieve in there?
That the strategy has been signed off by full council is enough for it to then feed through into the appraisals. So I think the objectives just need to be updated in line with this your latest version, Rob.
Okay.
The overview document's a good starting point, Caroline. I think because obviously we've got the tracker that Rob's working on, but that the overview of the strategic plan with all the top line headings, that's a good one to use to start with the objectives. Yeah, okay.
So I did have a bit more of a think about it, Rob, and yeah, I think really it was sort of Philip's point that we've only got a year left. Is there anything up here that we particularly want to prioritise? Was there anything from the strategy group that they would like fed through as a priority for this next year? Stunned silence.
Yeah.
Wasn't it? They all read the document.
Yeah.
Everybody's having a bit of a look at it. Yeah.
I mean, from my point of view, and obviously there's loads of projects on here that are really great, and I hope we all do all of them. But for me, the Oast House is time critical. The owners are willing to work with us, but they're getting very impatient, understandably, because we're essentially asking them to not market the building. And I think, if we're going to do it at all, we do need to we need to ask the staff to prioritise it. Otherwise, I don't think it's worth them pursuing it at all. So, I mean, I guess it's a genuine question to Karen and Katie. Is there something that is realistic to give the time that it appears that it needs over the next, few days, and then few weeks and few months and so on to make this work? I think I'm saying this as a genuine question because I think it's at the moment it's still at the exploratory stage, and the council hasn't made obviously a firm commitment to buy the building, but it is obviously going to demand a fair amount of staff time to push it forward at the speed that we need it to be moving at.
So just to bring you up to speed, the owners of the Oast House have agreed to the 6 months taking the property off of the market, and the document is being drawn up for them to sign from our solicitors. So once we've got that in place, then that meets the council's resolution that they were happy for us to then spend the time and resource and money looking into this for the next 6 months. I did have a quick word with Katie earlier, and she knows where we are at this stage and progressing it forward. I think is doable. I don't know if Katie wants to step in at this point, because obviously her expertise will be.
Can we come back to this point? So I take Ben's point in the spirit of this particular one we're talking about. There is an item further down for an update on the Oast House and how that's going. So, Katie, if I can we just kind of defer that update to that point, so we don't move away from what Caroline's trying to achieve.
Yeah, sorry.
Ben, I think your point is, do we want a top 3, top 5, where we actually say over the next year this is going to be aside from the strategy, broadly, these are 5 things we want to enshrine in stone.
Yeah, and I could pick. I'll pick some if you want, or I don't know what the best way to do it is.
So we've got Oast House. What else do we have in?
Well, do we want to make those 5 recommendations now? It feels like quite an off-the-cuff thing, and is that fair, given that we're going to be holding a clerk to account for the delivery of those items, or is this something we want to give more consideration to? And Caroline, what timeline are you working to? But before we come to that, Barry, you've got your hand up.
Yes, we've had a conversation earlier on about the neighbourhood plan, and so that does need to be in there, because there are very tight deadlines, and just saying that it's not in the not a priority. It has to be the priority in next year, or we might as well not start work on it.
Yeah. Okay. So the question stands: do we want to put together this list of a number of items? Caroline, does that work for you as feeding into the appraisal process, or is this something we need to handle in slightly different? Accepting that there will be those priorities, it's how do we play it into those appraisals?
Yeah, I was sort of expecting us to do that tonight, I must admit, to sort of come up with a few priorities for the next year. And then obviously, like, personnel will need to look at it. I'm not quite sure, because there aren't any more personnel meetings scheduled for a while, but appraisals are ASAP. So, but I'll have a talk to Karen about how we can sort of achieve getting it through the relevant things. But we could do it by email. I'm happy to do it by email, and because should it be the strategy committee who are feeding into this? Should it be all councillors who are looking at it? It's quite a difficult one, isn't it, to come up, because they're all priorities for everyone is a different level.
Yeah, indeed.
Different.
So but we do have the neighbourhood plan. We do have the OST.
My vote would be for the youth council, I think. So to get the youth council running and inputting into the town strategy, I think that's a great aim for the next year, and something that's very much achievable as well.
Yeah.
The other thing is also, like, sort of carbon neutrality. That was one that I had on my list. Making sure we're sort of really prioritising moving towards net zero.
Yep. Okay, thank you for those. So
Hello.
continue to compile. Christine.
Can I just add, I think that I was going to bring that up, Caroline. I think that is one of the items on the list that really needs to be borne in mind when we consider all of them, rather than, it can be an item on its own, but it needs to be a filter through which, decisions and choices are made in every single category, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, absolutely. There are some sort of some things that came out of the report that hopefully should be achievable, aren't there? So maybe.
Yeah. I mean, there's virtually hardly an area of our activity that we cannot consider through the lens of, what effect will it have? What can we do in terms of reaching our target for neutrality? So I think it needs to be an overarching consideration for every single category there, as far as possible.
Yeah, and that's sort of how the strategy works, isn't it, Rob? I guess, in terms of there are these overarching strategies, there's sort of accountability and vitality, reimagine, etc. So
yeah, exactly. Okay, continue to work through the hands. Thanks for that, Christine. So Emma, I'm going to come to you because you've not spoken this evening yet.
I think the splash park should be put on there, because it can be achieved within this next year, and it is something that we've all dedicated and said that we want to achieve, and we will support it. And I think we need to show that we're actually willing to do it.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And Ben.
Thanks. So it's really hard to start picking them out, and I'm just going through with my highlighter on the strategy document, and you kind of easily run into double figures. But I think there's some that are kind of already in hand, and effectively we don't want to take off the pedal, as it were, with them. And the other ones that we need to put a bit of extra weight on the pedal, if that makes sense. And so in terms of, you know, we've got 40 odd things on the list. Which of these do we definitely not want to let slip in a year's time? You know, some of them won't have moved on. Which are the ones that we don't want to be in that category? So for me, they are, I'm just going to say the whole list because I've covered some things that people already mentioned, but Youth Council, Farm and Craft Market, which is already in good progress. Oast House I've mentioned. Future High Street Fund is already in progress, but we don't want to let slip on that. Priory Centre deficit is in hand, but we don't want to slip on that at all. Energise report, neighbourhood plan, splash park, disability friendly. Those for me are that's my list of 10 or so, but I think of those there's probably 3 or 4 that we need to kind of gain some momentum rather than just keep the momentum. I'm not sure if that's very useful. I just said lots of stuff at you, but yeah.
Thanks, Ben. Apologies, I've got connection problems, so I caught some of that. So can you hear me?
I can hear you fine, yeah.
Cool, thanks. Sorry, it's just giving me all sorts of grief. So I believe that the list we've got as our recommendation back to the Personnel Committee through Caroline is the neighbourhood plan, the Oast House, the Youth Council, the carbon neutrality and the splash park. Those are the 5 items. Have I missed anything through bad connections?
Disability.
Yeah.
Neighbourhood plan, did you mention?
That was the first one. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Ben, is that what you said in the chat?
Oh, I don't. What did I say? So
Yeah.
I'll read out my list again. If someone can read, Karen, if you can cross it off yours. So
Yep.
Youth Council,
Yep.
Farm and Craft Market,
Yes.
Future High Street Fund,
Yep.
Oast House,
Oast House.
Priory Centre deficit.
Yep.
Energise report, stroke carbon, and neighbourhood plan.
You also had disability friendly on there as
And
well.
I did have
believe.
that. I completely skipped that this time. Yeah, quite right.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's on
So that's the
page.
same as what's in the chat. So if everyone
And
knows
the
the
splash
chat,
park.
can
Yeah.
see the list.
There we go. Yeah.
Plus Emma mentioned the splash park. That's not on your list, Karen.
Yeah. Sorry, I didn't scroll down far enough. So that's quite a big list that I've given. And then is that working?
Yeah, as a recommendation to take to personnel, that feels like it works. I think then potentially Caroline and the Personnel Committee, it's for you to work out how that sits in terms of what's realistic. I mean, for instance, with Splash Park, the CIO are leading on that. Is it fair to hold the clerk to account for something that may well be out of his control? So there's a question around that, but I think that's for the Personnel Committee to say.
I think that's the key, isn't it? Is the objectives need to be progress on rather than delivery of a splash park, which is something we can't achieve. And there's a number of those in there. But like the Future High Street Fund is not up to SN2C and things like that. But thanks, Ben, for the Priory Centre deficit. That's absolutely should be a key aim for those. Yeah, we have figures for that. So, right.
Cool. Steve? Oh, sorry, Karen.
Yeah, with respect to the can somebody mute themselves? It's really noisy in the background. With respect to the splash park, I think it is important that we hold ourselves accountable for it as well, because it's always going to be a two-way conversation. I think what's happened in the past is both parties haven't talked to each other enough, which is why there's been no progress. So I think holding ourselves accountable for that progress would also help process the whole project.
Indeed. Okay. Thank you. So, Caroline, does that give you what you need? Do you want that formalised into a resolution, or are you just happy to take a list?
I'm happy to take that list, and I'll talk about how we can best deliver that into the proposals. But I think it will go into the objectives and then be fed down.
Lovely, thank you. Okay, so these ones we've talked about. Incidentally, some of the strategy items have gone slightly out of kilter in the Excel version. So as I pick them up, I'm fixing them. I will get that sorted out and the latest version uploaded to the website through Karen. There was one here for Justin, but he's not around. So this was about tracking SIL spending through and SIL availability through the full council and through finance and governance. There was we were going to sort of make that just like Teddy available to do a summary of how much SIL we had and where it was going and all that sort of stuff on a periodic basis. I don't believe that's happened. And Justin had the action to arrange that. Is there anyone else from F&G able to provide an update?
Chair?
Yeah.
So not directly, but I've had a sort of parallel discussion. There was a really big echo. I don't know who it is, but it's obviously going through on speakers and back. If anyone
Probably
can
me. Apologies. I'm trying to mute everything.
How's that? That's gone. No, still there. Anyway, can everyone hear me okay?
Rob, you're on there twice.
Yeah, Rob, two Robs.
I am, but my laptop's all fully muted to them anyway.
Okay, that's
that
gone
better?
now. That's lovely. Okay. So what was I rubbing it on about? Yeah, so with the financial regulations came up at finance and governance meeting last meeting, and I had a few proposed amendments that I didn't have time to share enough in advance, but I've shared those with Theodora and discussed them. And one of them, the most significant one, was a proposal that all expenditure of SIL goes through the strategy committee. And the reason for that was that I didn't want our SIL receipts, our SIL reserves, just to be spent on whatever comes up first at full council meetings, but rather we need to tie it in with our strategy about, what are our priorities. So that was the proposal that's currently pending to take to finance and governance and then to full council. Theodora had separately discussed with SLCC about what counts as appropriate expenditure of SIL, and the question that came back was, is it in line with your strategy? And so obviously she'll need to speak for herself, but as far as I understand, she's very much in support of the proposal that all of our SIL expenditure goes through strategy, with a not necessarily that we will turn it down at strategy, but there will always be a report from the strategy committee, a recommendation to go ahead or not to do so. So I think while finance and governance is the right place to look at, kind of oversee our annual budget, because there's lots of complexity in that. With our SIL expenditure, it's kind of simpler in a way because we get some SIL and then we go and spend it, and that for me is a strategy issue, and so the strategy committee is the right place to have that scrutiny over the particular projects and how much is spent. But that's going to go to finance and governance at the next F&G meeting.
And being honest, those are the conversations we should be having here rather than going through individual line updates. And as this matures, we will hopefully move into a place where we can have much more meaningful conversations about how we're spending cash and doing that sort of thing rather than picking over individual items. Barry.
Yes, just to say that I think we need to be careful about strategy becoming a controller of SIL, because that really, I believe, is a responsibility of finance and general purposes. We should be setting the strategy, and finance and general purposes should be scrutinising whether or not that expenditure fits within the strategy. I completely agree with what Ben was saying, though, that we have seen lots of SIL money being allocated really to cover revenue budget shortfalls rather than provide improvements, significant improvements to for the town. So that does need to change, but I do think that it needs to go through finance. And finance, we be clear as a strategy committee what's in the strategy, and finance assessing it against that.
Okay, so Ben, you say that that's going to the next F&G as a proposal.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm sensing that that's the place for the debate.
Yeah.
and then it will come back to here in due course. I can see both sides of that. Okay, so I've got a note on that, so that's okay. Central resolution tracking. So I've updated here to say, Karen, you've obviously created the SharePoint folder, which is great. The resolution tracker folder within there is empty, or at least I couldn't see anything in there when I checked again earlier today. Is there next steps on that, and how we? Because Stephen, I think you've had an aspiration to remove those items from the agendas, so that we're not working through that list every time, and that we're tracking them elsewhere, but in an appropriate way.
I have an aspiration, but we've resolved to include them, so it's difficult.
So the resolution tracker, if I may, Chair, it just needs to be streamlined because it was a working document, and then it can go onto the shared drive. So realistically, I would say that would happen by the end of next week. The outstanding resolutions that are on the current agendas are fairly new outstanding resolutions. The one in the trackers were the ones that we went back over the last 3 years because we thought that there were some that were still outstanding from a number of years ago, but there are only actually 2 or 3. So I don't think the actual tracker is going to reduce having the outstanding resolutions on the agenda, if that makes sense. You could resolve to not have them on there, and then we could just have the tracker attached. But okay. Either way, they're going to be there, whether it's on the front page or the page behind. So.
Fine. So the action from a strategy point of view is we wanted to make those available in a central location. That's well on its way to happening end of next week, give it a couple of weeks. Yeah. Anything we then want to do around the agendas would be one for full council. That's what I'm hearing.
Yeah, and you know, every time an update happens to a resolution or a new one is made, it will be added onto that tracker. So that will be the live document that members can go to and keep a track of. So whether they've been to meetings or not, they can at least see what's been going on.
Cool. Anything you want to add to that just before I scrub it? No. Thank you. Then we've got, again, some of this is being picked up in full council. So we've got the second tender board for the solar panels. So I don't think we need to dwell on that because that's going through full council unless there's anything particular you want to call out as an update. Nope. And then this next one was around the heating controls, which I'm not sure that anything specific has happened on that one. But again, Karen, if we could get the resolution and the date that went with that, we can see how long it's been since we agreed that was going to happen. I think the solar panels have taken centre stage on that particular one.
Yeah, I'll double check. I think it was the end of 2019. And it just hasn't been looked at because of the pandemic, the offices
it was,
etc. Yeah, so
because there were also the LEDs and in the offices and things like that, weren't there?
Yes, yeah, we're trying to get those in, Christine. Hopefully, now that people are back in circulation again, which would be great.
We'll keep tabs on it.
Cool. And then Ben, festival. I think I'm right in saying I saw an email from you saying that we were pushing that out into 22 because of COVID. So I think it's just an action to update this line saying nothing's happening this year. It will go into next year. However, there was a separate line on here which hasn't appeared for some reason about the installing the electric point, which I believe is going somewhere. Is there any particular update? Have we got a date in sight for that, or is that just something that's in the future pipeline?
No, well, yeah, it's in progress now that we've got another year to get it done. I'm slightly less nervous about it being done in time, but I want to get it done in plenty of time. Yeah, so the festival, we haven't done a public announcement yet, but we will have.
Oh, sorry, I was supposed to mention that.
No, it's fine. You know, people, it's all good. So yeah, so we're now aiming for July 2022. We have had a discussion about whether we want to do some indoor events in autumn, kind of like something like St Neots Festival Presents. And so if we can work up something that looks viable, we'll come back to the council to discuss that, because we might ask to use some of the venues, but we haven't got a specific ask yet. So yeah, I'll get back to you on that.
Okay, thank you. Barry, you've got your hand up. Sorry if I've missed that for a period of time.
Yeah, it was just something to note that if we're, I don't know what the cost of upgrading the lighting in the offices is, but we ought to be wary that the Priory Centre may have a short life.
That's a very good point.
Yeah, but it's a full council resolution, so it's on the strategy because it's something separate we're going to do. If there's a variation to that, back to full council. Similarly, supporting Pride, Stephen, there was nothing specific around that, but I think there's been some movement on this for this year. Is there anything you want to add to that?
The Pride Committee is still meeting regularly and intending to hold an online event later this year, but I think any hope of a physical Pride in 2020 has been disposed, so it's not going to happen until 2021. They're still constituting themselves properly and would welcome any support that we could offer them when they're in a position to receive it, I think. But yes, it's a very active and enthusiastic group of people, and I'm sure that there will be a Pride in 2021.
I hate to say it, Stephen, but it is already 2021 and they're looking at 2022.
Yeah, that
one.
Add one, N+1. Sorry.
N+1. All right, thank you. So those were all the items which I thought we should be picking up updates on. I think what tonight has probably shown is we need to go back to the role that we talked about previously that the committees play in this, and getting these updates onto the agendas for those committees and updating through that channel rather than us kind of going through it, even though I think we have all the committee heads represented on this call. Otherwise, I'm just going to take this filter off. And the other point on the agenda was whether there were other items that we wanted to bring some focus to or provide any updates to, because there's a lot of items on here that don't have any dates at all, and is now the time to start putting some dates on some items that we're worried about drifting. So that's an open forum, but I think that's the last item that we have to discuss this evening.
I've got an observation, Rob. Next week we've got our annual town meeting, which the agenda is going to be circulated for, and it includes an update on everything this council has achieved in the past 12 months. And I think that should be the vehicle that we use to unveil this strategy to a wider audience. So either you or I think, should present elements of this strategy to the town.
Yeah, up for that. And the other, so connected to that is, even though it's in the agenda, but I don't think it's on the agenda itself. But what I did was I extracted effectively the headlines, so the objectives, goals, and strategies. The objectives and goals, and put them into just a kind of some Word document, which Karen has done a much prettier job than I did originally, and that is in your agendas I'm just trying to find it, appendix, I'm stalling for time now, attachment 2. So attachment 2 is the copy text that we would intend to put up on the website as the summary of what the council is intended to do under this strategy. And Stephen, I think that then sort of sets the foundation for doing it at the annual meeting. So this was just this was something to take note of, but I think it underpins that point you've just made.
That would be excellent, thank you.
Lovely.
Chair, the item about controlling costs on the Priory Centre, I think that needs to be reworded a little bit more diplomatically. I don't think that it would be good PR for us to put that on a town council website in that wording.
Okay, I mean we can reword it. It's not an issue if you've got a proposal. Suggestion.
I think it needs to be worded more along the lines of improving efficiency, scrutinising, I don't know, scrutinising output. I don't know, something a little bit more management speak than that, because I think that will be something which would be very detrimental to staff opinions of us, because it looks controlling costs has a sort of certain
Could
feeling
it just
that
be
goes along with it.
something as simple as Priory Centre utilisation, or?
Well, that's one aspect, isn't it?
Mm.
Sorry, Barry, I don't know where we're looking at. I think we're doing
It was
that.
in the list where it was Priory Centre deficit. It's that one, isn't it, Barry?
Well, it was whatever was on the screen, flashed on the screen a moment ago, which I think was Rob's document.
Oh, the subsidy required to run the Priory Centre will be reduced.
Oh, okay.
I don't know. I think I'm looking at something different.
So let me hang on. I will just quickly switch.
What appeared on the screen a moment ago that was going to be, I think it was said that it would be put on the town council website.
Yeah, that's the attachment. I'm trying to get it to share again, but for some reason it's not. So somebody's taken over.
That's Rob. It's got it. Yeah.
Is that you sharing it, Ben? Now.
That's Rob.
Isn't it? Rob?
No, it wasn't. It wasn't that. I don't think it was that document, was it?
Okay, well, Barry, this is the copy that we're proposing goes to the website.
Well, maybe someone shared something then that flashed on my screen that no one else saw. there were about four or five items on a page, which I thought it was said would appear. It was just after Stephen was talking about what would be said at the council meeting about what the council had achieved in the past year.
I think it was a page of Karen's notes that flashed up because I saw it too.
And that's the list. That's the list of the objectives that were agreed, and in that list it had Priory Centre deficit, which was one of the ones that Ben put forward.
Oh,
I think that's what you saw.
Okay.
Yeah. So we need to change the wording of that, don't we?
Well, I just think that it needs to be couched in more friendly terms, perhaps.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
And this is just a list for myself and Caroline in the personnel committee, so we'll make sure that it's worded.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Fine. So, Stephen, thank you for your point around the sharing this next week. Happy to do that. So then, as I say, the remaining question is: are there other items that are on the strategy that we should be prioritising and giving more focus to? And I'll say that's the last point on the agenda.
Rob. Yep. So, I mean, obviously we've covered things that we want to prioritise, which is great. I think the other thing, just to kind of a really open question, really, but with the Future High Streets Fund, money approved, as far as we know, it's all going ahead, but it's still unclear to me, at least, exactly what the process will be in terms of how HGC engages the town council. Obviously, it's HGC's project, so they kind of have the final say on pretty much all of it. However, the town council clearly has an interest in the Priory Centre, and so I've no doubt that collaboration is expected and will be required. The question then really is, what does that collaboration look like, and who will it involve, and what the scope of the town council's input? I think that, you know, there's a whole load of stuff to unpack there, and I'm mindful that unless we're quite clear about what we want to do and how we want to do it, neither of those things will be achieved by us. I think we need to be really prescriptive about what we want to get out of this partnership project. And there's been lots of discussions, but I think in order to move it forward successfully, we need to have a consensus, which is a very nice objective. I don't know what that consensus is and how we get to it, but that's the challenge I put to this committee. I think in terms of my own involvement, obviously I've been in the master plan steering group meetings, which has been more or less productive at different times. But yeah, it's hard for me to speak on behalf of the town council because there's so many complicated issues around it that, you know, I don't speak for the town council unless there's a resolution behind it. And so maybe it's something that, yeah, I don't know. I'm not quite sure what to do. I also think that the community centres working group has a very specific scope at looking at reducing the deficit, and that has all sorts of implications, but we're not necessarily being charged with the task of coming up with a creative vision for what the new building, or the newly refurbished building might look like. And maybe it should, that might be an answer, but yeah. Big sprawling question, no particularly useful answers from me.
So the strategy line around the Future High Street Fund is purely that we will support the bid, assuming we chose to do that, which we did, and that's job done for this year from a strategic point of view. Is it not the role of the master plan group to be promoting then the town in that and shaping it and doing those kinds of things, or actually does full council need to set up something to sit alongside that? And coming back to the point of the strategy, do we need to change anything within the strategy that reflects that, or is our overall ambition to support it in a way that's, you know, works for the town? Does that still hold true? And the devil's in the detail. So an equally not helpful answer. Sorry, Barry, your hand's up.
Rob, the master plan group, I think it met about 3 months ago, briefly. I don't think it's meeting again until May. I don't believe it has any real input into the Future High Street Fund. There's two very different objectives here. The master plan group was concerned with regeneration of the town centre, and a wider brief of doubling the GVA for the gross value added for St Neots, and that was the objective that was in the original master plan documents. The Future High Street Fund has a completely different brief in that it's concerned with moving the high street to accelerating change for the future of the high street. Now that change may be at direct conflict with what we had in the master plan group. They're two different things. Now I can see that there'll be a feedback cycle of some information through a master plan group if it continues. It has very little funding left, about £1 million was the budget, most of which is allocated to consultants for things like transport studies, high street studies. So there's not really a lot that the master plan group is going to be if it does continue, other than a feedback process of some information from Future High Street Fund. But Future High Street Fund is under strict confidentiality rules at the moment, and I would imagine that it will continue to be so.
Indeed. So come back to the original question, does anything in the strategy need to change around the Future High Street Fund? Or, in light of everything you've just commented, Barry, and your point originally then, is this something that full council needs to think about how we're going to treat that strategy line? And because I see those as two different things.
Yeah, so my answer off the cuff to my own question and your subsequent questions is that we have an opportunity to have a more specific or creative ambition for that building. You know, this is all that once in a lifetime cliche, but you know, there's an opportunity to do something different with the building, not just make it slightly smarter. And for me, that might look like, so we've talked about it being a proper theatre rather than a room that doubles as a theatre, but that will have implications. If you make it into a fully, you know, into what you would recognise as a theatre, that will have negative impact on its versatility. So how does the design process for the refurbishment respond to those different needs? And that's a strategic, creative decision. And at the moment, unless we be proactive about it as a council, those decisions will be made by HGC. Now, I don't suspect that they'll leave us out of that conversation entirely, but unless we've got a coherent position on those questions, we won't, you know, why would they listen to us if we're just kind of some people saying some different stuff? So I'm not sure what this process looks like, but what I can anticipate is if, you know, a small group of us come up with some sort of meaningful, creative vision as to what we want our new Priory Centre to look like and to function like, and we take that to HGC at the right time, which, to be honest, is pretty soon. We've got a reasonable expectation of it being listened to, but we need to be proactive.
Okay. Stephen.
Yeah, I just wanted to agree with Barry saying that the master plan seems to have finished and kind of failed. If you look at some of the original objectives, none of them being fulfilled, and the whole thing has been consumed by the Future High Street Fund, which is being run by HDC. We do have a role to play in the success of that plan, though, because Katie, a big part of revitalising the town centre is going to be utilising the newly pedestrianised Market Square, and Katie's playing a key role, I think, in packing that full of events. I think there's always going to be negativity while it's not a car park if we don't use it, and despite the constraints of the coronavirus pandemic, Katie's got some really good things lined up, and I think the town council has to take a leadership role in using that space, because we've seen from the farmers market that farmers market Saturdays increased the footfall in town by over 40%, and I think, you know, we're a market town, and utilising that Market Square is a critical part of the success of the whole Future High Street Fund, I think, and we can play a huge role in that. So I think we should have it on our agenda.
Okay. So I'm still not sure that answers my actual question. So there is a lot of action around the Future High Street Fund and a time to play that action. Do we want to change any of our strategic points? Ben, what I might be hearing from you is actually we want a separate strategic point around the use of the Priory Centre. We might want to set some direction as a council for what we want to see from that. Stephen, at the point around the Market Square, I think we've already covered that under another point. Or we can add these in, and we can then take them to full council and as an amendment to the strategy and say, guys, do you support this?
Can I propose that we answer this by the next meeting, having a kind of a bit of a workshopping session about what do we want the Future High Street's delivery to look like? So some of these, the high street improvements, we might not have a strong opinion on. They all look fine, you know, as much as we've seen them. Priory Centre, we might have a stronger opinion about. Falcon, we might have a stronger opinion about. And let's actually, the strategy committee has probably got a good collection of people to come up with something coherent that we can take to full council, get it approved by full council, and then we take that to HGC, hopefully about the right time that they're actually beginning to talk to architects and civil engineers.
Yeah, that works for me. So not as something as formal as an extraordinary meeting of the strategy committee, but perhaps some email conversation or whatever to share some ideas.
Yeah, kind of get the conversation going, and then I think the next strategy committee meeting we actually have a resolution that we propose something to full council to say this is our vision for those projects. And they don't need to be detailed. I think it's just about what do we want to get out of those projects? What does the town want to get out of them?
Yeah, okay. Barry, Stephen, you both got your hands still up. I don't know if they're old hands, but Barry first.
Sorry, it's old hand.
No problem. All right. Thank you. So, I mean, if there's no other further points to discuss on the strategy overall, then I'm happy to draw things to a close. I'll just look around the virtual room one more time and just make sure everybody's had the opportunity to say their bit. Oh, I tell you what we didn't talk about, sorry, quickly, is the Oast House. There was a line on here, and I don't know what's happened to it, but Katie, I promised you that you'd have the opportunity. Sorry, the cat's just thrown a glass across the room. Katie, you'd have opportunity to talk about that. Is there anything you want to add on that point?
Hi, I've just been interested listening to all your points this evening. I mean, I think with the Oast House, obviously it's positive news that the owners are, keen to work with us now. I mean, this project will obviously take, a significant amount of officer time, which, me as an individual, I'm happy, to do that. But obviously, if I'm prioritising that, then other things, will be, put back. And I know that obviously the neighbourhood plan needs revisiting, so that's another sort of urgent project to be focusing on. I mean, what you have to bear in mind about the Oast House is even at the end of the feasibility study, as a council, we may not be in a position, to take the project forward. So there is a significant amount of work to be done, without any guarantees at the end. So that, you just need to be mindful of that as a council. Interested all about your other points, the Future High Street Fund. I mean, I think, you making your position clear about the Priory Centre is probably the most, important thing, really, because the other elements of the project, you know, will be led by commercial interest, you know, with the Falcon and obviously the town centre improvements, you know, all look, you know, good as they are. So I think, you know, definitely the Priory Centre is somewhere that as a council, you know, you should be focusing on and having a vision, you know, to go to HTC with when the time comes.
Cool. Ben, any reply on the Oast House point?
No, yeah, Katie's obviously completely right about, you know, officer time. Time is money, or, you know, it's time that she won't be able to put to other projects. So I do think we need to be sensible about it. I mean, I think for me, one of the key questions practically about that building is regarding it's grade 2 listed. The Malting Tower is an ancient monument, so that can't be touched. But the grade 2 listed means you can do internal alterations, but generally not external. I think that if we can't, as potential new owners of the building, change the access to that building, which is currently going up those 2 concrete flights of stairs, if that is a no-no, that we can't alter the access, it's not a viable project. So for me, that's the first thing that we need to look at. We do need to get this agreement from the owners that they're now, so there was some confusion about where we were with that, but we've kind of hopefully moved beyond that, and we're in a position where we can get a written agreement for them to keep it off the market. From then on, it's the first thing we need to do is to get some, you know, professional advice as to what is likely to be possible. The other thing then regarding the written agreement about them keeping it off the market, I think that we need to get some sort of price commitment, a sale price commitment in there, because basically we don't want them to promise to keep it off the market and after 6 months they ask us for £1 million for it. And similarly, they don't want to keep it off the market and after 6 months we offer them £100 for it. You know, so essentially the price needs to be built into that agreement. The middle way, rather than pick a price, because obviously that's very subjective, is we could look to peg it to an independent evaluation, and I think that's probably the way forward. But if we can hopefully include that in the process of getting this written agreement, I think that's for me, it's the only way forward at this stage.
Ben, are there any plans for the that you've got for the building apart from I mean, have you looked beyond creating a ground floor access? I mean, what would be behind the doors?
So personally, I've got some, you know, 3D drawings that I've mocked up just to kind of think about the space. The whole process from the Architectural Heritage Fund is typically you will have 3, not quite business plans, but business cases. So we could do this with the building. Is that financially viable? It could be, this could happen, this could, you know, so they're looking for typically 3, and to work up the viability of each and see if any of those are, you know, viable. So the things that have been talked about are a brewery with a bar, restaurant, community space, theatre, co-working space. There's an awful, you know, there's a whole range of things that can be put into the mix. It doesn't have to be one of those. I think most likely it'll be more than one. But I think, you know, at the moment for me, the motivation is it's a fantastic building that is unused, is likely to stay unused. And if the council can bring it into the public realm and make it a valuable community asset as well as a great building, then there's intrinsic benefit in that.
In terms of this letter from the solicitor, this agreement with the owners, this is just a gentleman's agreement, really?
Can I suggest that we might be getting into territory we don't want to get to in a public call?
And Philip has his hand up as well.
Yeah, Philip has his hand up.
Maybe we can discuss this when the recording and the call is finished, because I think it's a very important point.
But by all means, so Philip?
I was just going to suggest a cost-effective way forward. Have you spoken with the Conservation Officer, either Louise Brown or Nick Armour at District? Because obviously planning permission will be needed and they will be the people which will say yes or no. I would get them on board, get their views and comments, especially if you want ground floor access. If they say no immediately, you know where you are, and it will save you a lot of time and money.
Thank you for you, Chair. Yeah, so I did reach out to HTC planning officers back in October. We didn't get very far at that time, but I think it might be worth another go.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you. Sorry, Katie, I nearly forgot we got you in at the end. If there's no further comments, then I'm going to draw this evening to a close. All right.
done. Thank you very much all for
everybody.
your time.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
Thank you, Philip, for
Thank
joining us
you.
again. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Good night.
When is recording stopping? Oh, right.
When I press the button, hold on, Barry.
All
Bear
right.
with.
Once you've stopped recording.